I'll answer the questions anyway. What the hell? Okay. If you're tuning in on YouTube, or on Facebook rather, we are starting our stream now. This is not the show. We're going to start that in a few minutes as people have a chance to log on. So we're just going to be goofing around here for a few minutes while the camera's getting set forth. I've got a couple of comments that came in already on people looking at that. Nice picture. Thank you, Dolores. Nice, says Manju. And Michelle asked, is the radio show still on? And when currently is the YouTube live show? The YouTube live show, we start anytime on Friday afternoon to stream live. It's going to start in just a few minutes now as we get all these cameras put together. The radio show is on Saturday, which is a duplication of the audio from our show, our live show. It's on Saturday on all the little radio stations around Nevada. If you go on your computer to KELY1230.com, it'll give you a list of, there's 10 or 11 stations now that are streaming it live. It's simultaneously broadcast at noon on Saturdays, and is the half hour of the meat of the show. So you can listen to it while you're driving out to go boating on Saturday just before lunch. We are there. Mike, thank you for coming in again. We're
Anytime you're ready, just toss it. We'll get the show started.
okay.
Do you have your clock set?
I do not. It's on my phone, which is still turned on. Whoops, that's what you see in real life, is my phone going off. While we are going to set my little clock here for 20.
Roughly 12 minutes to get to Jerry.
I'm doing, you want me to do 12 minutes so we go to the break, or the whole 28?
Yeah, we'll do the whole 28, and
Okay.
around 12. Toss it to break.
Okay. Well, I'll see that when we come. Okay, I'm all set there,
Okay.
studio technician. Hey, good afternoon, and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are broadcasting here in Las Vegas from the studios of the American Guns and Glory Network. The show is about guns, related political subjects, and self-defense issues. Kind of big, this whole thing here is on self-defense issues, really. Fired Up is on our website, firedupwithbobirwin.com. A new show is posted every Thursday around 5 p.m. We're kind of put it up whenever. The show also appears on YouTube, at the moment anyway, and numerous other media that's just too long to list. There are a lot of places that are carrying it now. The audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners on noon on Saturdays, and the the Nevada Talk Network. You find that at KELY1230.com for all the stations. Questions or comments, you can send an email to me at bob@firedupmail.com. That'll appear on the bottom of the crawl in front of me as we go on with the show. Or leave a message on my office recorder, which is 702-257-1060. I listen to that thing at least once a day and will return your calls and answer your questions, depending on which way you send it, with a message or an email or whatever. I'll try to answer in the same format. If you leave your contact information, that is, I will try and answer in the same format. If you just call up and say, "You're a jerk, Bob, you're really ugly, get off the air," then, and you don't leave your number, I can't call you back and tell you whether I agree or not. As I started to say, this show is a little bit odd. We talk about firearms defense generally. There are a few hundred of those incidents every week in the United States. We're going to talk on this show more like defense against children. I'll get into that as we get into this. My guest today is an old friend of mine, retired Metro Police Department. That's our local police department here, LVMPD. Detective Sergeant Michael Bunker. Mike, welcome to the show once again.
Welcome to be here.
We still got lunch tomorrow?
Still got lunch tomorrow.
All right. If you'd give a little bit of your background for listeners, and I'm going to pick your brain.
I was a police officer with the Las Vegas Police Department when we merged. I have been a police officer for 40 years. I'm retired now. I've worked uniform patrol as a patrolman, uniform patrol as a sergeant. I worked general assignment night shift. I ran 2 crews, swing shift and graveyard, that responded to almost any kind of felony that took place, up to and including murder. Then I finished my career working organized crime in a variety of different criminal acts, all the way from contract murder to outlaw biker gangs, mob-related, just a variety of even Ponzi schemes. So I've had a variety of different jobs.
Lots of varied experience in law enforcement, and that's really one of the primary reasons I wanted you to come on today to talk about this. We're going to talk today, what's going on here is there's been a recent and apparently still continuing series of incidents occurring here in town near Elkhorn and Fort Apache, if you know the intersection. If you know the intersection, you know what I'm about to talk about. It involves as many as 60 middle school students from a nearby school that's right on that almost on that same corner. The young hooligans appear to be 12 to 13 years old. The incidents are this large group of about 60 of these little folks are coming out of school and running across the street. They are grabbing people on the street, stealing purses, punching. They've stomped on a few local residents. They jump into vehicles. If your door isn't locked, they open the door or come through the window and grab whatever's on the seat and steal it. They pick up rocks and throw them at people. These are baseball-sized rocks. And they've broken windows of houses and have injured some residents. There's been some coverage of this on local news media. Fox 5, KVVU News here locally, and several other citizen bloggers have published cell phone videos of all these attacks. Fox 5 has interviewed victims and attempted to get an explanation from the school police and the LVMPD as to why nothing is being done. These people that live in the area, this is happening. This one woman that was stomped to the ground and kicked was attacked 3 times that day. When she got up, they came back and knocked her down again. And again, their reports are the children are being detained by the police for violent acts. They're quickly released and usually return the next day and repeat the acts over again. The residents are left with few choices about what to do about it. And we're dealing with some things that appear to be gaining ground to be seriously life-threatening incidents. When they're smacking people with a baseball-sized rock, you can certainly be seriously injured or possibly even killed. And you know, the answer in some of the blogs that I've seen are people responding to the news media reports and some blogger reports after seeing the videos, and they're professing that the answer might be or should be for them to shoot because it's a serious bodily harm or death possibility. And is the answer really to shoot a 12-year-old? And I have to tell you, I have run into this kind of on a personal level, that question. I recently was defending a client. You may have all seen the thing on TV about a year ago. We had 3 youngsters crash into a smoke shop in the evening, 9:30 at night. And 2 of the 3 came running in the door with their hoodies pulled up and their T-shirts pulled up to cover their faces, etc. The clerk behind the counter, as they entered, drew a firearm that he had behind the counter. He perceived a threat. He fired. He had about 1.5 seconds to make that decision. He believed there was a real threat. Turned out that the leader of this group was a 13-year-old who was unarmed. We find that out later. And this guy, the 24-year-old defendant, barely escaped going to prison for first-degree murder. He was able to cobble together, because his family had sufficient money to spend a couple $100,000 on first-class lawyers and investigators and so forth. And ultimately, the DA decided to allow and agree to a plea bargain where he was given probation and instead of a 25 to life sentence for an open murder charge. But it broke his family to be able to come up with that amount of money. I've told media that he's the most innocent person I ever defended. Fortunately, he's got a lot of credit for time served and so forth and so on. And he will, he's got 3 years probation, and his life has turned around, as you can possibly imagine, because now he will always be the guy who murdered an unarmed 13-year-old. And that's what we're looking at in this case. If someone decides to use gunfire, this is a confrontation that, in my opinion, you can't win. Anyway, Mike, now that I've expounded on all of that stuff, we're gonna take a short break here for a minute from a word of one of our sponsors, because we're dang near halfway through the show already with me just explaining all of that crud. After the break, Mike, I want to address 3 things in your expertise, and so I can argue with you about it, of course. What can or should the victims do? The people who live in this cul-de-sac that's in apartment buildings that seem to be the main attack point here. What can Metro PD do? Why they're responding? And then we have the school police involved, and the juvenile courts will eventually get these cases. And it seems, anyway, seems like a no-win. We are, I'm not going to offer a solution because I don't really have one, but you know, you're supposed to be able to offer me one. So there you go. So we're going to take a minute here from a word from one of our sponsors, and we'll be back just momentarily. Don't go away.
My name is Jerry Creed and I'm a gun trust attorney. If you want to own an NFA firearm, a gun trust is a great way to own it because it allows multiple people to lawfully possess a firearm instead of just a single individual. I have reviewed lots of gun trusts and I have found they often don't include the forms you need to bring people on as trustees and remove them as trustees. In addition, a gun trust will save you the cost of probate and avoid probate, and it can protect your executor and family members. You know, there isn't an element of intent in these laws that affect the NFA firearm possession. So it doesn't matter if your wife didn't intend to sell the gun at a garage sale or yard sale, or your daughter didn't intend to drive the car with the silencer in the trunk. A gun trust is a great way to protect your family members and friends and share in the fun and pleasure of owning NFA weapons. If you want a gun trust done right, remember to trust Jerry.
Hey, and we are back. So, Detective Sergeant Bunker, at the immediate point that this is happening, there's somebody crashing through their car, breaking their car window with a rock, throwing rocks through their window, or attacking somebody, knocking them on the ground. What can or should the victim or resident do? How do you react to this?
Well, it's a difficult question because the youth involved, particularly, we're looking at sub-teenager individuals, they don't understand for the potential of what could happen to them and to others. What can a citizen do? Information, 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 and keep contacting the appropriate authorities. If they have the availability, I would suggest external surveillance so that they can document all of the incidents, not just hand cameras and that sort of thing, but surveillance is relatively inexpensive. They can set up surveillance cameras so that they have documented information that they can use in making a report to the appropriate law enforcement group. Report to law enforcement. Document the events by date and time. Metro needs to respond, and they have. The difficulty is, what do you do with a sub-teenage individual that you're trying to establish what they committed, and what do you do with them? Well, if they're able to document it and show it, they can either arrest them at the time, take them to the juvenile home where they could be processed and the appropriate court dates will be set up, or they can issue a summons to them to bring the young individual and the family into this so that the family understands the seriousness of what has taken place. This is awfully young folks, but it's not like this is the first time this has happened. They have the flash mobs where they go into a grocery store, a 7-Eleven, and just steal it blind and run away. Trying to prosecute them as adults is difficult in itself, let alone sub-teenagers that are barely above the age where they can be legally arrested for committing a crime.
We have pretty well stopped a lot of that stuff now by double locked doors, and where they have two doors and they have to buzz them in and so forth and so on, and they tell the kids. A friend of mine has a gas station here next to a junior high school, and they just won't let more than 3 in at the same time because the clerk can't watch them all. And that's the rule, and if you don't want to obey the rule, you go somewhere else. We can wall them off because we have a building. And the surveillance, of course, then tells you who the bad guy is. But here, unfortunately, we're dealing in it with an open area, and I don't see a solution to this, and I'm not kind of pushing you to find one, but I understand what Metro is going through, and I just, if we jump to, well, the 2 other things have come in that law enforcement that should be doing something, and that's the school police. And from what I have read from the school police's response, even when interviewed by full news media, by Channel 5, they've said basically they have no jurisdiction because the kids are off school property. They're certainly going to run over there if they see somebody stabbing somebody. You know, any law enforcement officer is going to jump in, but they don't really have standing there. It's actually Metro PD's, in this neighborhood, it's Metro PD's jurisdiction. So the school police are kind of out of it. And the juvenile courts, I know the problem's there. In my misspent youth, I was a juvenile parole officer for a while. And you really can't do anything with a 12-year-old. There is, well,
It is extremely difficult to deal with young individuals, particularly that are not even teenagers yet, sub-teens. What do? You know, of course, you report it to the police and everything else, but the juvenile courts are not going to become involved in this until they have a criminal complaint and somebody arrested for it, or somebody cited into court. They won't have anything to do with that. After juvenile court, what are likely to happen? You were a probation officer. The probation officers will attempt to monitor these children, will attempt to monitor their home situations after they have been adjudicated as a problem. But every probation officer may have 60 to 100 different clients that they're supposed to monitor and see every month.
I've heard
Impossible. You can't do a good home visit with somebody with less than 2 hours.
And even there, at that time, because of lack of radio communication, I was there before cell phones, and we're in habit with the really dangerous ones to call ahead and say, we're coming tomorrow at noon.
Yeah.
Realizing they're going to hide their stuff, but otherwise we're going to surprise them with the drug lab in their bedroom and get shot at. And the juvenile courts do have something. We have a juvenile prison, per se, a high school up in Elko, and we do send them out of state, where this 12-year-old can be incarcerated till he's 18. And there is something can be done, and maybe once they go through the system, we're talking about somebody committing a serious crime that your smart citizens have been able to videotape, so there's clear identification.
And the citizens need to continue with that. Documentation, reports to law enforcement. Like I previously said, exterior surveillance of the area so that they can document that. The school police may not be able to assist in addressing the problem per se as far as being there at the students, but they can certainly assist law enforcement, the Metropolitan Police Department, in identifying these individuals. I would hazard a guess to say that not all 60 are individuals that are, oh, let's go out and do something. It's probably a much smaller number. And if you can identify and target those individuals who are the nexus for the problem, you have a higher probability of being able to solve the problem. And I would have to say that the juveniles that are the leaders in this particular situation have probably already had a number of contacts with the school that they attend as bullies and or as problem individuals within the school. So the school police can assist other law enforcement with the identification of these individuals and then culling out the wannabe followers and people who just think it's fun. If you can crack the nut of getting the individuals who are the main protagonists, you have some hope of solving the problem.
I'd agree, and I can tell, I can tell you, of course, the juvenile officers, the school police and so forth have incredible amounts of files and paperwork on all these guys. They record every contact. They've got all the gang symbols, what the thing on the left shoelace means, if it's painted blue on the end and that sort of thing. They can tell who the bad guys are, and they have records. It's all sealed, of course, because they're juvenile records. But they have the information. They can actually pick out the bad players. And I'm just looking at that, if we, they are then prosecuted in the juvie courts, we can put them in jail in the 4-6 years until they're 18. And I got to imagine that maybe the ringleaders don't care. It'll give them street creds to be sent to Elko or out of state to some other facility that can handle the more violent ones. But the taking them off the street for 6 years prevents them from egging anybody else on to do this same thing.
Well, maybe even if you don't.
And then they're 18 and we can put them in real prison.
I'm not sure that's the answer, putting them in real prison or the other. There's a lot of other resources that are available that if you can get the ringleaders or the leaders or the people who are instigating this, if you can get them identified and removed from this particular scene right here, where you can put them into an alternate school where they have better supervision, counseling. There's a variety of things, it doesn't go from we catch them and we send them off forever.
No.
We've shown that doesn't necessarily work well with adults.
We do have alternative schools where they're assigned to a school that's full of this type of kid that's messed up for whatever reason. And I understand that. Talking to a 13-year-old and trying to convince him that look where you're going to be when you're 25, I've had them say, I'll never make it to 25. I'll be dead by the time I'm 19, but everybody will know I was cool. And that's where their brain is. They're
bulletproof. They see the things on TV and, all of the hoorah that the other young juveniles say and do. They build off of one another. They enhance the
can't
problems.
cut that. That's live.
Yeah, I know. They can enhance the problem, and if you can remove those people and get them special attention, because it's much easier to give special attention to 3, 5, 6, 10 than it is 60 people that just think it's cool to be there, and I see my friend throw a rock, so I'm going to throw a rock too because I want to be cool.
Yeah.
If you can weed it down to where it's the main instigators, the ones who throw the first rocks, the ones who go up and thump on cars, that try and break into cars, if you can get those people and bring them into the system, you have some hope of changing their attitude and their life, because if it continues in the same vein now, they are just going to become worse and worse and worse.
I agree. We're just about out of time. I want to thank you all for watching Fired Up with Bob Irwin. The older shows will be up on our website shortly. We have, because we're now working in high definition, you can tell all the wrinkles that I have that you didn't know about before. The older shows are not in high def, so we've got to do some tricky stuff to get those on the air on the website. If you want to look at what I said wrong 3 years ago. The commercials are what keep us on the air. Capitalism wins. So we are going to encourage you to do that. I'm going to tape another commercial right after we're done with this to get another high-def commercial on. The audio portion is on the Nevada Talk Network. If you remember that, look up Nevada Talk Network or KELY1230.com. Thank you for supporting Fired Up. Somewhere on your computer, probably, there's a little button that says you can subscribe, and these shows will be sent to you automatically. They usually go out a day or two later on YouTube. That helps, and you don't have to worry about forgetting to record it or whatever, because we'll be there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week with California and Nevada attorney Don Green. Thank you.